The air was heavy with the weight of loss as the funeral procession moved slowly through the cemetery. The sky, once clear, had turned a dull gray, casting a somber tone over the gathering. Rows of uniformed soldiers stood at attention, their expressions unreadable but their eyes reflecting the pain of losing one of their own. The American flag draped over the casket fluttered slightly in the breeze, a silent tribute to the man who had given so much for his country. Among the mourners sat a German shepherd, his dark eyes scanning the scene with an alertness that had never left him, even in retirement. Max was not an ordinary dog. He was Sergeant Daniel Miller's partner, his protector, and his closest companion during the most dangerous moments of their service. Max had always been by Daniel's side. Through the deafening blasts of war, the long nights spent in hiding, and the moments of quiet between missions, he had remained steadfast. To the outside world, he was a military canine, trained for discipline and precision. But to Daniel, he was more than that. He was family. Now, as Max sat beside Daniel's mother, he seemed to sense something was wrong. His ears twitched at the sound of muffled cries. His nose flared as if searching for a familiar scent that was no longer there. Though he did not understand words the way humans did, he knew loss. He had seen soldiers fall in battle. He had watched men grieve. But this was different. As the chaplain began to speak, the crowd listened in silence. Sergeant Daniel Miller was a hero, not just in the battlefield, but in the hearts of those who knew him. He was a son, a brother, a friend, and a protector. His courage saved lives, his kindness touched souls, and his loyalty was unmatched. Max's tail, usually still during formal moments, gave a slight wag at the sound of Daniel's name. It was a name he had heard countless times, always spoken with respect. But today there was something final in the way it was said, something Max could not fully grasp. As the chaplain continued, Max's gaze locked onto the casket. Something inside him stirred, an unease he could not shake. He let out a slow, heavy breath, his body tense, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with battle. A few feet away, Daniel's mother wiped away a tear. She had always known how deep their bond was. "He still thinks Daniel is coming back," she whispered to the person beside her. The woman nodded solemnly. Maybe he's right, in his own way. But what happened next would leave everyone speechless. Max had always been more than just a military canine. He was a soldier in his own right. Trained for combat, detection, and protection, he had served alongside Sergeant Daniel Miller in some of the most dangerous war zones. Their partnership was not just built on commands and obedience, but on trust, survival, and an unspoken understanding that neither would ever leave the other behind. Daniel had been assigned to Max early in his deployment, and from the first day, something clicked between them. While other handlers treated their K-9 partners with rigid discipline, Daniel had always treated Max like an equal. He spoke to him, not just in orders, but in conversations. He would sit beside him during quiet moments, scratching behind his ears, telling him about his life back home, about his family, his dreams, and his fears. In return, Max had given Daniel something priceless, unwavering loyalty, and a sense of comfort in a world filled with uncertainty. Together, they had been through everything. Max had sniffed out explosives that could have taken countless lives. He had stood his ground against armed threats, never hesitating to put himself between danger and his handler. And when the chaos of war faded and the night fell silent, Max had been the one to lay beside Daniel, his presence a reminder that no matter what happened, neither of them was truly alone. When Daniel's tour of duty ended, he fought to bring Max home with him. It wasn't easy. Military K-9s were often reassigned, their years of service valued more than their personal connections. But Daniel refused to accept that. He had filled out paperwork, contacted officials, and even reached out to his superior officers. He argued that Max had saved his life more times than he could count, that they had survived too much together to be separated now. After months of battling bureaucracy, Daniel had won. Max was officially retired and welcomed into his home as family, not just a former soldier. The transition had been smooth. Max adjusted quickly to civilian life, trading battlefields for peaceful walks and missions for lazy afternoons in Daniel's backyard. Still, a part of him remained ever vigilant, as if always waiting for the next call to action. But Max hadn't been ready for this. He hadn't been ready to lose the one person who had never left him behind. Sitting at the funeral, surrounded by unfamiliar grief, he didn't understand why Daniel wasn't calling his name, why he wasn't reaching down to give him one last reassuring pat on the head. His ears twitched as he heard the honor guard move. His muscles tensed. Something inside him stirred. And then, before anyone could stop him, he sprang forward, straight toward the casket. The soft shuffle of boots on grass and the rustle of the flag being folded filled the quiet air. Soldiers moved with practiced precision, honoring their fallen brother with the utmost respect. But among them, one presence broke the stillness. Max. The moment the honor guard reached for the flag, Max's body tensed. His eyes, sharp and focused, locked onto the casket. His breathing grew heavier, nostrils flaring as if searching for a scent that was no longer there. Then, without warning, he moved. A blur of muscle and fur, Max leaped forward, breaking free from the grasp of Daniel's mother. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the powerful German shepherd sprinted toward the casket, his paws kicking up bits of damp earth. Soldiers, trained for combat and chaos, stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Max jumped. A single leap landed him atop the polished wood of the casket. The impact was gentle, almost reverent, as if he understood the weight of the moment. His claws barely made a sound as he adjusted his position, lowering himself until his body stretched across the length of the casket, his head resting near where Daniel's would be. Then came the sound that broke everyone's heart. A low, mournful whimper escaped Max's throat, a sound so raw, so filled with longing, that it shattered the composure of even the toughest soldiers. His body trembled slightly as he pressed himself closer, as if trying to feel the warmth of his best friend one last time. Silence fell over the cemetery. No one dared to move. No one dared to speak. Even the wind seemed to still, allowing the moment to stretch into eternity. Daniel's mother brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. She had already lost her son, but now she saw grief in its purest form, a soldier's most loyal companion, refusing to say goodbye. The chaplain hesitated, his voice caught in his throat. The honor guard lowered their hands, their disciplined movements faltering as emotion overtook them. A few soldiers turned away, their hardened expressions unable to mask the tears slipping down their faces. Max remained still. His ears twitched slightly, as if waiting for the voice he had known so well, waiting for the command that would never come. And then, just as the weight of grief pressed down on every heart in attendance, Max did something no one expected. He let out a deep sigh, a sound not just of sadness, but of understanding. It was as if, in that moment, he finally knew. Daniel wasn't coming back. But Max wasn't ready to leave him. Not yet. No one moved. No one spoke. The entire funeral had come to a standstill as Max lay stretched across the casket, his body rising and falling with slow, heavy breaths. It was as if time itself had paused, allowing everyone to witness the depth of loyalty that could not be put into words. A lump formed in the throats of even the toughest men in uniform. Soldiers who had seen war, who had faced the horrors of battle without flinching, now blinked away tears. The weight of the moment was unbearable, pressing against every chest like an invisible force. Max let out another soft whimper, his head resting against the smooth wood. His ears flicked slightly at the sound of muffled sobs from the crowd, but he didn't move. His heart, though still beating, was broken in a way that only those who had loved deeply could understand. Daniel's mother took a shaky step forward. Her hands trembled as she reached out, gently stroking the fur along Max's back. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He's at peace now." Max didn't lift his head, but his tail gave the smallest of flicks, acknowledging her presence, but unwilling to move from where he lay. He was still guarding Daniel, even now. A soldier, standing at attention nearby, finally broke the silence. He sniffed and wiped a hand over his face before speaking softly, almost in awe. "I've seen loyalty before, but not like this." Another soldier, a man who had served with Daniel and Max overseas, nodded. "That dog saved lives. He saved Daniel more times than I can count." His voice dropped lower, "And Daniel saved him too. I don't think he knows how to be without him." The honor guard, unsure of how to proceed, exchanged hesitant glances. No one had been trained for this. How do you ask a grieving K9 to step aside? How do you break apart a bond that had survived war, time, and even death itself? Max took a slow, deep breath and exhaled again, his body rising and falling against the wood. He wasn't causing a scene. He wasn't barking or panicked. He was simply there, refusing to move, as if he believed that by staying, he could keep Daniel close a little longer. Minutes passed, stretching out endlessly. The chaplain finally cleared his throat, his voice gentle. "Max," he called softly. "Daniel wouldn't want you to be sad, buddy." Max's ears twitched, but he didn't move. The silence grew heavier. And then something happened that no one expected. Max, still lying across the casket, let out a low, deep sigh, then closed his eyes. A hush settled over the cemetery as Max lay motionless atop the casket, his deep sigh lingering in the air like an unspoken farewell. His body, once rigid with tension, softened slightly, but he made no move to leave. His eyes, dark pools of sorrow, remained closed as if he were lost in a world only he could understand, a world where Daniel was still by his side. Daniel's mother knelt beside the casket, her hands gently resting on Max's thick fur. Tears streamed down her face, but she fought to keep her voice steady. "You were his best friend," she whispered. "You kept him safe when I couldn't, and I know he loved you so much." Max let out another soft whimper, the sound filled with a sorrow too deep for words. The way he lay there, protective yet vulnerable, made it clear that he wasn't just mourning. He was waiting for Daniel to wake up, to give him the command that had ended every mission. "Come on, buddy. Let's go home." But the words never came. A soldier nearby clenched his jaw, his hands tightening into fists. He had served with Daniel and Max, had seen them in battle, had watched them work as one. Now he watched helplessly as Max refused to let go. His voice was thick with emotion as he spoke. "That dog went through hell with him. And now he doesn't know how to stop fighting." The chaplain cleared his throat, stepping forward, his eyes wet. "In the time I've served, I've seen grief take many forms," he said softly. "But this is love in its purest form." The honor guard, usually so disciplined, found themselves shifting uncomfortably, torn between duty and the raw emotion before them. They had been trained to fire their rifles and salute, to fold the flag with precision, to maintain composure at all times. But nothing had prepared them for this moment. Daniel's mother stroked Max's back, her touch gentle but firm. "Sweetheart," she murmured, "he's with you, even if you can't see him." Max's breathing hitched, his ears twitching slightly. He lifted his head just an inch, his nose pressing against the flag that covered the casket. He inhaled deeply, as if trying to capture the last remaining trace of Daniel's scent. And then, slowly, painfully, he lifted his gaze. His eyes met Daniel's mother's, and in them she sought everything: love, pain, confusion, and something deeper: understanding. A tremor ran through Max's body. His muscles, once tight with resistance, seemed to loosen. His tail gave a single, slow wag, not in happiness, but in acknowledgement. It was as if, at last, he realized what everyone else already knew. Daniel was gone. And yet, his love remained. A gentle breeze whispered through the cemetery, rustling the leaves in the distance. Max remained atop the casket, his body finally still, his breathing slow and measured. The weight of understanding had settled upon him like an invisible force, pressing down yet somehow lifting something within him at the same time. Daniel's mother continued to stroke his fur, her touch a quiet reassurance. "He wouldn't want you to be in pain, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice trembling. "He'd want you to be okay." For a long moment, Max didn't move. Then, ever so slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes, still filled with sorrow, searched hers, as if looking for permission. Permission to grieve. Permission to let go. A soldier knelt beside him, a man who had served with Daniel, and seen firsthand the unbreakable bond between them. His voice was hoarse with emotion. "I know it hurts, buddy," he whispered, "but you did your job. You kept him safe, and he loved you for it." Max's ears twitched, his gaze shifting from the soldier back to the casket. The honor guard, still standing at attention, waited in silence, their movements hesitant. They knew the ceremony had to continue, but no one dared to disturb what was unfolding. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, Max lowered his head once more, this time placing it gently against the folded flag. The moment was unbearably tender, as if he was giving Daniel one last nuzzle, one final expression of love before parting ways. A deep, heavy sigh escaped from him. It wasn't just sadness, it was surrender. The fight inside him, the refusal to accept what had happened, was finally giving way to something else. Acceptance. Daniel's mother wiped her tears and whispered, "Thank you, Max." The soldier beside him placed a hand on his back. "Come on, boy," he said softly. "It's time." For the first time since the ceremony began, Max moved. It wasn't sudden or forced, but slow and deliberate. His paws shifted slightly as he pushed himself up, his muscles stiff from the weight of his sorrow. He stood over the casket for a moment longer, looking down at it as if memorizing every inch. Then, with a quiet grace, he stepped down. The crowd, holding their breath for what felt like an eternity, exhaled as one. Max walked toward Daniel's mother and gently pressed his head against her leg. She dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around him, holding onto the last living piece of her son's unwavering love. And as the honor guard prepared to continue, the world knew they had just witnessed something far greater than grief. They had witnessed devotion in its purest form. As Max pressed against Daniel's mother, the weight of the moment settled over the entire cemetery. The honor guard, once frozen in place, now moved with careful deliberation. Though they were trained for discipline, their usual rigid precision seemed softer now, as if they, too, felt the unspoken emotion lingering in the air. Max remained by Daniel's mother's side, his large frame leaning into her touch. She stroked his head gently, whispering words that only he could hear. "You are his world," she murmured, "and I know he's still with you." The honor guard raised their rifles, their movements crisp and controlled despite the grief that lingered in their eyes. With a steady voice, the commanding officer gave the signal, and the first shot rang out. Max flinched. His ears twitched, his body stiffening at the sudden crack of gunfire. Instinct kicked in, years of training, years of battle, years of reacting to danger. For a brief moment, he looked around as if expecting a command from Daniel. But it never came. Another shot. Max's eyes darted toward the casket. His tail lowered, his body tense, but he didn't move away from Daniel's mother. A third shot echoed through the cemetery, the final farewell of a fallen soldier. The flag was then lifted from the casket, its red, white, and blue colors standing in stark contrast to the gray sky above. The honor guard folded it with care, each movement deliberate, each crease pressed with the respect Daniel had earned. When the final fold was made, a soldier turned and took slow, measured steps toward Daniel's mother. He knelt before her, extending the flag with both hands. "On behalf of a grateful nation," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion, "we thank Sergeant Daniel Miller for his service and sacrifice." Tears welled in her eyes as she reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the fabric. She clutched the flag tightly to her chest, as if holding onto a piece of her son. Max watched, his gaze following every movement. His ears flicked forward as if listening, as if he somehow understood the weight of what was being given. The cemetery fell into silence once more. The service was over, but the grief remained. Daniel's mother took a deep, shuddering breath before looking down at Max. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered, gently patting his head. "Let's go home." Max hesitated. His eyes lingered on the casket for just a moment longer. Then, finally, he turned. As he walked beside Daniel's mother, his steps were slow but steady. He didn't look back. But everyone there knew. He would never forget. The cemetery was nearly empty now. The crowd had dispersed, the honor guard had marched away, and the last echoes of the rifle salute had faded into the wind. Yet as Daniel's mother walked toward her car, Max remained at her side, his head held high despite the sorrow in his eyes. The folded flag rested against her chest, held close as if it were a lifeline. She glanced down at Max, her fingers brushing gently against his fur. "We'll take care of each other," she whispered, just like Daniel would have wanted. The drive home was silent. The world outside moved on, as if nothing had changed. But for those who had loved Daniel, nothing would ever be the same. Max sat in the passenger seat, his ears twitching at the familiar hum of the road, but his gaze remained fixed on the horizon. When they arrived at the house, Max hesitated at the doorstep. The home smelled the same. The scent of Daniel still lingered in the air, mixed with the warmth of a place once filled with laughter and life. But something was missing. The sound of boots on the floor, the steady voice calling his name, the hands that had scratched behind his ears after every long day. Daniel wasn't coming home. Max stepped inside slowly, his paws making soft impressions on the carpet. He moved through the house with quiet purpose, stopping at the living room, where Daniel's old military jacket still hung on a chair. He sniffed it once, then let out a low sigh before curling up beside it. Daniel's mother watched from the doorway, her heart breaking all over again. The days that followed were quiet. Max remained by her side, following her from room to room, never letting her out of his sight. At night, he slept by Daniel's bed, his body curled in the same spot where he used to wait for his best friend to come home. But as the weeks passed, something changed. One afternoon, as Daniel's mother sat on the porch, staring at the sky, Max came to her side. He nudged her hand gently, his eyes searching hers. She smiled softly, running her fingers through his fur. "You miss him too, don't you?" she murmured. Max's tail wagged, just slightly. It was the first time she had seen him do it since the funeral. In that moment, she realized something. Max wasn't just Daniel's dog. He was family. He was a reminder of everything Daniel had stood for: loyalty, courage, and love. And though Daniel was gone, his spirit lived on in the quiet presence of the dog who had never left his side. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the yard, Max laid his head in Daniel's mother's lap. For the first time since that heartbreaking day of the cemetery, they both found a small, quiet comfort. They had lost someone they loved, but in each other they had found a reason to keep going. Because love, true, unwavering love, never really dies.